Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the new program kickoff presentation. My name is Melissa Montgomery. I'm a project engineer here at EWB USA headquarters, and I'll be giving the presentation today. Thank you for attending. The first thing that I would like to say is congratulations to everyone that's been on the call for having been approved for a new EWB USA program. So what we intend to do today is to kind of answer this question, what do you do now? And the first thing that we'd like to remind you before we start off with anything is that the work that you and your chapter do will have an enormous effect on your partner community, whether that's positive or negative. So that's something to keep in mind as you move forward. So here's an outline of today's presentation. As you can see, we have a lot to cover. We're going to go through it pretty quickly. We do have additional presentations that go into more depth on some of these topics, and so I'll try to mention those as we go through the presentation. But the first thing we're going to do is talk about our mission and vision, then go into our ICP, or International Community Programs team, and then we'll shift a little bit to how we partner with our community partners and what that looks like. We'll talk a little bit about our 5% cash contribution requirement because that's something that gets brought up a lot with us. And then we'll kind of shift and talk about mentors for your project, and then go into our project process and the requirements that you guys will need to travel on your first assessment trip, including your technical plans and reports, your health and safety, your PMEL, and then receiving your technical approval and your pre-trip travel approval. And then finally, we'll talk about some of the resources that we have available for you. So the first thing I'd like to go over is the mission and vision of our organization. EWB USA's mission is based on more than just blueprints and measurements. It's based on the real relationships and 5-year partnerships with the communities. So as you can see here, our mission is to support community-driven development programs worldwide through partnerships that design and implement sustainable engineering projects while creating transformative experience that enrich global perspectives and create responsible leaders. And then our overall vision is a world in which the communities that we serve have the capacity to sustainably meet their basic human needs. And on the right, you can just see some statistics about our organization when we started and the impact that we've had so far. Okay. This is the International Community Programs team, or the ICP team. Our director, we have a new director who is starting in a couple of weeks. He hasn't started yet, but his name is Chris Bleers, and he'll be starting just after Labor Day. Next is your ICP program engineers. There's 4 of us. I'm Melissa Montgomery, and then there's also Joshua Knight, Katrina Myers, and Chris Brandewy. So hopefully you all know who your program engineer here is at headquarters. We also have an ICP manager who is Gretchen Smithwick, and she handles all of the new programs. So the program adoption, new community applications, she basically manages that aspect of it. We also have our ICP coordinator, Marin Brownell, and she handles our health and safety and our travel-related questions and approvals. And then for just general inquiries and inquiries about our online cloud-based system called PAUSE, we have just a general email there, and all of those emails actually go to Marin, so just for your information. So that's everyone on our team. So hopefully get familiar with the people on, that work here at headquarters. So now I'm going to shift a little bit and talk about how we partner with our communities. So EWB USA programs are long-term partnerships between the chapter and the community with a minimum of 5 years. We do have quite a few programs that have gone on for longer than 5 years. So we do allow that, but we do ask for a minimum of a 5-year commitment. You'll be collaborating and have an ongoing relationship with the community, and you'll be in contact with them on a regular basis, and not just when you're ready to travel. So the expectation is that you guys will actually form a partnership and a relationship that will be ongoing, and that you'll have regular communication, whether that's via Skype or phone calls or Facebook, but you have a continual communication path. So it's really important to establish a communication plan with the community and identify a primary method of communication. And we'd also highly recommend considering a secondary method as your backup plan. One of the things that I've seen since working here is that the programs that aren't successful, that end up being canceled or closed, oftentimes it's due to that lack of communication. A communication plan had not been set up. So that's really, really important as you are starting your program. And then finally, your team is expected to travel on an assessment trip within 1 year of starting your program. And if you cannot continue with the program, then your chapter must inform EWB USA headquarters as well as your partnering community. And then we do have a program cancellation or closeout procedure that you will be expected to follow. So you can't just decide to close a program and not notify us at headquarters or your community partners. Okay. So now I'd just like to kind of try to make a distinction between some nomenclature that we use of programs, partnerships, and projects. So here at EWB USA, we seek to approach community development holistically. And that means we want to implement engineering projects that are part of the larger community development program. And so we've made this distinction between a program, partnership, and project within the context of our project process. So the program represents the overarching commitment between a chapter and the community partners to collaborate on community-driven projects. And within a program, chapters will form partnerships underneath the program level with the community. And with this structure, what it allows us to do is that a chapter can have additional partnerships under one program. So an example of this would be if your chapter were working with a community and you had an existing partnership with them, you completed a project, and then a neighboring community noticed that the work that you did and said, hey, we want a similar project, can we partner with you too? So your chapter would form a partnership with that neighboring community, but you would still be under the same program. So hopefully that makes sense. And then within each partnership, chapters may implement multiple projects which address the needs identified by the community. So for example, if in your first project is a water quality project where you implement a slow sand filter, and then after that, the community identifies a sanitation need, and then you implement composting latrines. Those are two separate projects, but still under the same partnership, under that same program. So managing multiple projects within one partnership allows the chapter and the community partners to take a more holistic and integrated approach to the community-driven development. And one thing to also note is that the partnerships will also incorporate a community needs assessment, education, as well as monitoring and evaluation components. And then, as I said earlier, chapters and communities must commit to a partnership for a minimum of 5 years to accomplish all that's required for a sustainable community program. So you might be wondering what this commitment looks like. It can take on many different forms. These are just a couple of examples of how some chapters have done it. So the first example is in the first year, a chapter will do assessment and design. In the second year, they will do an implementation. And then the last 3 years, they would focus on education, monitoring, and evaluation. So that's one path that you could take. Another is below. In the first year, you would assess and design project 1. In the second year, you would implement project 1 and then assess and design project 2. And then the third year, you would implement project 2 and assess future projects. And you can see the kind of pattern there. And so it's really just going to depend on your chapter, your capabilities, your mentors, your community that you're partnering with, and how motivated they are. So there's a lot of factors that will go into it. So don't think that there's only one way that one path that your chapter should follow for this 5 years. It can take on many different forms. So here are just some things to think about how this 5-year partnership might affect your particular chapter, especially if you're a student chapter. One thing to consider is that you may no longer be part of the program by the time that the program ends, so you want to make sure that the program is sustainable at the chapter level. And so some things to do that, you want to make sure you establish a strong foundation of leadership and membership to support the program. You want to keep the program and project continuity in mind when you're staffing your trips. So by that we mean, if your project lead is about to graduate and the new project lead is coming on, then maybe it makes sense to have the current project lead and the future project lead travel together on a trip so that the community is aware of that transition, and everything can be transitioned smoothly. So that's just things to think about as you move through the program. You want to make sure that all information that is gathered is documented really well so that the future project teams don't have to reinvent the wheel. We're hoping that our new PAWS system will help support this to be able to document everything within our database system so that chapters can provide that continuity as leaders transition. The project lead must pass along information to the next project lead. That's their responsibility. And then you want to keep a good file for the program, including your thorough report. So just keep those in mind as you start to move through your program and start working, designing and implementing projects. So this slide here kind of shows how we envision our 3-way partnership structure. So each partner has separate roles and responsibilities to be able to ensure a successful program. And so we have the partnering community, which sometimes we call the CBO, or community-based organization. And then we have the local partner organization, which sometimes is an NGO, but can also be the local government or municipality. And then we have the EWB USA chapter. And then in the center of that, you see that's where the program and the partnership and the projects lie. We do have a document, it's the 511 document, that outlines the project partner roles and responsibilities in much more detail. So I would encourage you guys to go on the website and find that and look at it. It kind of gives you an idea of what the roles and expectations are in the partnership, and I would certainly recommend bringing that information during your first assessment trip and having some discussions with your community partners about the setting out what the roles and expectations are for the program. And now I'd just like to spend a couple of minutes talking about our 5% cash contribution requirement. This is a requirement was established in the beginning of 2014, so it's been around for a couple of years, but we still get a lot of questions about it. So we thought we'd just talk about it a little bit here at the beginning to establish that expectation. But in an effort to implement more sustainable projects, we do have a 5% cash contribution for all of our projects that started after 2014 when this policy was put in place. And some of the reasons you can see here that we have this requirement, we've seen that it builds a sense of ownership in the work that you're doing and that the community is doing. If they have contributed cash, it kind of gives them more skin in the game, if you will. It really better gauges the community's interest in the project. Again, kind of relates back to the last point. It also incentivizes the community's selection of the least cost solution that really speaks to appropriate technology and what these communities can actually operate and maintain in the long term. So if you're proposing a solution to a problem that's very, very expensive and the community can't afford to contribute that 5% contribution, then that's usually a sign that we need to maybe scale things back or look at maybe a different technology. And then finally, it kind of speaks to the last point, demonstrates the community's capacity to pay cash for ongoing operation and maintenance. So these are just some of the reasons that we have this requirement, and we do have a pretty good paper, summary paper documenting all, the research that went into it and how this kind of evolved. And so if you'd like to have more information, if you're interested in reading that, you can find it on our website. And then if you just want kind of the facts, we do have an FAQ of our most commonly asked questions. And I definitely recommend reviewing that before you go to travel and meet with your community, because it's likely they will have questions about this during your first assessment trip. Just a couple of more points about our 5% cash contribution. It is required in addition to in-kind contributions. So in-kind contributions include things like lodging, food, and unskilled labor, and again, these do not count towards that 5% cash contribution. If the community is purchasing materials, donating materials, paying for skilled labor, or getting financing from their government, those can all count towards the 5% cash contribution. And then one final note is that the 5% contribution must be used for the capital construction costs up front, and they cannot be saved for future operation and maintenance costs. So hopefully that's clear, and if there's questions, we can try to address those at the end. So now I'll shift to talk about mentors and mentor teams. So hopefully everyone who is attending this presentation has a mentor team. If you don't, I would encourage you to start looking for one now, but presumably you were, one of the things that we looked at when you were approved for a new program is your REIC. So your chapter must have a responsible engineer in charge, or the REIC, for your design, analysis, planning, and travel. And your mentors must meet the minimum qualifications. So we do have some resources that outline the minimum qualifications for the responsible engineer in charge, as well as the mentor team. And one thing that I just like to point out is that sometimes faculty members may not have the adequate design build field experience to serve as the REIC for some of the projects. While they do have a lot of academia and great experience, some of the things that we're looking for, some of the qualifications are, experience in the field, construction experience, and those kinds of things. One thing to note is that we review traveling mentors with each pre-trip plan and at the final pre-trip travel approval. So, depending on your specific project and what you're going to be doing on that particular trip, we'll be reviewing the qualifications of the travel mentor to make sure that they can fulfill all the needs of that specific trip. Let's see. We recognize, that your REIC may not be able to travel on every trip, and that's understandable and acceptable. But we still are looking for a travel mentor that's going to meet the qualifications. So if you don't have a traveling mentor for your assessment trip, I would encourage you to start looking for one now. And if you're running into difficulties, please feel free to reach out to your program engineer for assistance so that we can try to help you with that if that's something that you're struggling with. Here are some resources for our mentors. So the first item here is our volunteer village, which is a new online platform system for our volunteers to collaborate and to do their project work. We, on our website, we do have quite a few resources. If you want to read and learn more about our mentor teams, you can just click on the link here. I've provided links to the qualifications for both the responsible engineer in charge and the overall mentor team. And then we do have a separate presentation that's just focused on mentors. And so that is actually required for all of our mentors. So if there are mentors on this call, please be sure to view that presentation as well. And then finally, we do have an ad hoc mentor committee, and they have put together a website with some resources If you're interested in that, you can certainly check that out. And then one thing that's not on here is our volunteer opportunities board. Hopefully you guys have seen that. You can find it on our website. And if you do have a mentor need, one thing that your team can do is post an opportunity on the volunteer opportunities board. See if you can find a mentor that way. Okay. So now we're going to talk a little bit about our project process. Just so you know, we do have another separate presentation that just goes over our project process in much more detail. So this is just going to be a pretty brief overview. And I would encourage, project leads to also view that project process presentation. So generally speaking, our process follows normal standard engineering procedure, and that includes identifying the problem, assessment, completing an alternatives analysis, design, implementation, and then monitoring and evaluation. And the reason that we developed this process is to ensure that we are implementing quality projects. It's not just a set of hoops that we're trying to get you to go through to get approval so that you can travel on your trip. We really do, take the projects that we implement very seriously, and we do want to do very high quality work. So we do expect all chapters to know and comply with our project process. And this last item here actually is should have been updated because we no longer have monthly submittal deadlines. But we do still continue to have deadlines, but they're based on your specific trip date. And just something to keep in mind, they're typically 2 to 4 months in advance of pre-trip plans. So if you're thinking about traveling, in the winter, you want to start thinking about that pretty soon now, planning for that assessment. And then the last thing is your post-trip reporting is due 8 weeks upon your return to the United States from your trip. So this slide kind of just talks about our documentation that we have. A lot of the project data will be input into our PAWS system, which is our Project Administrative Workflow System. It's our new database online cloud system. And then some of the technical reporting that you'll do will be still done on our templates, and then those will be uploaded into the PAWS system. So the documents that we have for assessment, we have a pre-trip plan that you complete before you go on your trip and get approved. And then we have the assessment post-trip report. And so when you return from your assessment trip, you complete that report that documents what happened on that trip. In addition to the assessment, we have a travel safety plan, which must be completed with every trip that you go on. There's an alternatives analysis document, and that gets completed after your assessment is complete and before you move into design. And then when you get to your design and your implementation, we have the pre-trip plan that you complete and get approved before your trip, and then the implementation post-trip report. And then when you travel on an implementation trip, we also require a pre-trip construction safety plan. So we want you to address safety as it relates to the construction aspects of your project. Sometimes chapters get a project approved and don't complete the implementation during one trip, or they plan for multiple trips in phases of a project. Those trips can be planned with the continued implementation pre-trip plan document. And then finally, we have, when you get into monitoring evaluation, once your implementation is complete, we have a pre-trip plan that you complete before you go on your monitoring and evaluation trip, and then the monitoring and evaluation post-trip report is completed upon your return. All of these documents are available on our website and the resources and project process. So look for those, and there's also a link to them within the PAWS system on the left-hand side if you're getting to that system. This slide just kind of shows what our data structure looks like in our new database PAWS system. As you can see, some of the things that I mentioned earlier, the program, the community partnership, and the project. So we just moved to this system this summer, so it's a very new process for us. And when we moved from our old paper process to this PAWS system, we did make a couple of changes to the structure of our data. So basically what we did was we added this new community partnership level to our data structure. So you can see that we have a program, which is the overarching commitment, and then we have the partnership, and then the projects go under those community partnerships. So projects progress through phases with technical plans and reports. And the technical plans and reports will focus solely on the technical plan before the trip and the report after the trip. And all administrative information, including the overview project information, the travel safety plans, the contacts, the travelers, as well as the PMEL, will be moved to online forms as trip tasks. So those, we no longer have those documents, and those will all be input in the PAWS system. And one of the benefits to this new structure is that a trip can easily span multiple projects, community partnerships, and project phases because the technical plan is now separated from the administrative trip information. So hopefully all that makes sense. This slide here shows the workflow of the tasks in PAWS. So the first three items at the top are program, community partnership, and project initiation and closure, which will only occur at key points in the process. And then if you look at the final four steps, you can see they're kind of cyclical, and this is where most of the project work will occur. The trips and the technical work right here. So starting at the top, we'll just move through it. A chapter would search for an unassigned program and select it to apply to adopt. This will replace the open program list that we had on our website. And then from there, you would complete your program adoption. And you guys have all done that. So now you guys are kind of at that fourth step to create your new trip. So one thing to note is that there are two separate approval processes associated with the trip. There is the trip approval, which includes all the trip administrative work, and then there's the technical plan approval, which includes the technical plan for the trip. So the technical plan is due first, and that's due 8 weeks in advance of travel for an assessment trip or a monitoring and evaluation trip. And if you're going on an implementation trip, that you guys don't need to worry about for a little while, that would be due 16 weeks prior. So once you submit that, your program engineer will review it. If there's any issues, they'll reach out to you. And then once that technical plan is approved, then your chapter can submit for your trip approval. And one thing to note is that the trip is due at least 3 weeks prior to travel. So there's two kind of deadlines. There's the 8-week deadline for your technical report, and then the 3 weeks for your trip approval. And then once your team travels, and when you come back, you would go back into the same trip within the PAWS system and the technical plan records, and then you would input your post-trip information. So these are the next steps for creating a new trip. In the PAWS system, you want to create a trip, including the trip names, the dates. You'll add trip security information, your budget, any small travel team or extended stay information, a draft of your partnership plan, and a draft of your project monitoring. And then you'll also, for your technical plan and reports, you would complete the templates for your assessment phase, and then you would mark all the pre-trip requirements as complete. You would upload your template that you've completed that outlines everything that you're going to do, and then you would click on submit for approval. So that would be your next step 8 weeks prior to when you want to travel. And then to know if you have successfully submitted it for approval, you'll see the submittal history at the bottom of the page for that technical report for that trip, and you'll see it'll say pending. Okay, so now let's move to planning, monitoring, evaluation, and learning, or our PMEL program. So hopefully all the teams that are on the call today have identified a PMEL lead for your program. This person should review the PMEL lead qualifications to make sure that they meet the qualifications to serve in this role. And then for your first assessment trip, the things that you'll want to focus on are your draft project monitoring indicators. And those can be, the standard indicators are found on our website. And then you also will prepare your draft program, plan, and baseline study. And so this baseline study is basically your team documenting what the baseline situation is at the outset of your program, so that you can, as you move through your program and implement projects, you can go back and see what that initial baseline was and see how the work that you've been doing has been impacting the community and how it's been impacting them. So, you know, definitely submit that, and that's something that you'll, again, want to be discussing with your community partners during this first assessment trip. In addition to that, the last thing you want to submit is your draft community agreement project partnership plan. So that's it's an agreement that basically outlines the roles and responsibilities of each of the partners of that program. And so this is typically signed before you move into your alternatives analysis and design. Sometimes chapters are able to get it signed on their first assessment trip. Sometimes chapters get it on their second. It just depends on the community. Yeah, so have a look at that. Make sure that you get that submitted. And then if you need some additional information, we have a lot of resources on our website and our help center specifically on PMEL. So I would say look there first, and then if you still have questions, you can reach out to your program engineer. One of the things that we take very seriously is health and safety for our members, and we do have a pretty robust health and safety program. And so with your trip, you'll be expected to submit your travel safety plan. And this is completed online now, and it's required for all the pre-trip plans. Please be aware of the high-risk travel location requirements. If your program has a DOS travel warning and or a high-risk travel security rating per ISOS, we do ask for additional travel safety procedures. So be sure to check on that. And then, as I mentioned earlier, with implementations, this won't affect you guys going on your first assessment, but when you get to implementation, we do also require the pre-trip construction safety plan, which again addresses the safety as it relates to the implementation. We required 2 first aid and CPR health and safety officers for each trip. So if you haven't identified those yet, please try to do that early and don't put it off until the last minute. And then if you want some additional resources about our health and safety, you can find them following this link on our website. Just like to take a moment to make a note about travel team size. So we ask that your travel team size be based upon the requirements of the project and not the travel dreams of the chapter members. We know that all chapter members want to travel, and that's completely understandable, but we do try to limit our travel size teams to 8 people. What we found is that travel teams that are larger than this can stress out the host community. In addition, it can drain the resources of that community, especially if it's a small remote community. It can definitely make project coordination a lot more challenging and difficult. And then finally, it does take away the financial resources away from the project. So because of this, we do limit the number to 8, and that would include the traveling mentor. If you do have a larger group, we would first request that you try to stagger 2 smaller teams that are traveling in series. And if that's the case, then each travel team would be expected to have a travel mentor. And then if you have, a strong reason why your team needs to take more than this, then you can address that with your program engineer and provide them with the reasons why additional travel members would benefit the community with which you're working. So, yeah, if you have any questions on that, you can reach out to your program engineer. So this slide kind of goes over the requirements that we have for our presentations. We have a few presentations that we ask our travel teams to view, at least the project leads, but preferably everyone that's traveling. And these are the project process, the member code of conduct, and planning for sustainability on assessment trips. And then in addition to that, depending on what your project type is for your first project, we also ask that you view the technical presentation if your project is a structure project, a water supply project, or a sanitation latrine project. And then finally, we have, as I mentioned earlier, a presentation for our mentors that we would ask all our mentors to watch before traveling. So all of these presentations are available on demand on our website, and you don't have to pre-register like you did for this presentation. You can just watch them whenever you want. And I think they're generally about half an hour each, around that time frame. So as I mentioned earlier, your team must receive technical approval by your program engineer on your technical plan and report. So just some tips to help you get that technical approval as quickly as possible. We'd ask that you review all the pause instructional videos if you haven't already, to kind of get an idea of how that system works. Try to complete all the sections, don't leave any blank. Attend or view all of the required presentations, and then make sure you have the appropriate mentors for your travel team. And then finally, we do have a document called the 505 Site Assessment Checklist. And if you haven't seen that already, I definitely recommend having a look at it. It kind of goes through various topics and questions that you might want to ask during this first assessment trip as you're trying to gather information. And you can find that on our website under resources. And once you have your technical plan approved, then your chapter will need to get your pre-trip travel approval. So as you can see here, the steps that you need to kind of check off your list before you can apply to get a travel approval. You want to make sure you have your technical approval, make sure that your travel team members are active EWB USA members. You want to make sure that you have your trip contacts completed with the emergency contacts, as well as your travel waivers completed and uploaded. And then finally, you want to make sure you have payment. You've paid your QAQC cost allocation. And so the QAQC cost allocation, if you're not familiar with that, it's defined in our 2014 dues and fees policy, which you can find on our website. And the cost allocation is automatically deducted from your project fund at the time of technical approval. And if your chapter doesn't have sufficient funds to cover that cost allocation fee, then you'll be sent an invoice by email from our accounting department. So you just want to make plans early to arrange for the payment of that so it doesn't delay your travel plans. And then if you want to review the travel checklist, the 611, you can find it here at this link on our website. I'd like to take a moment now to talk about our volunteer engagement team. We used to have what we called chapter relations managers. Some of you may or may not have heard of that. But now we have what we call our volunteer engagement team. And the primary roles of this team are to first to introduce new members to EWB USA, to connect new and existing members to engagement opportunities, to equip chapter officers and faculty advisors for success through training and tools, and then to provide support on topics such as membership, chapter management, and event planning. So this is where the volunteer engagement resources live on our website. You can find chapter and financial resources. If you go to the My EWB USA and click on that little hamburger, go to My Chapter. Here you can find information about chapter management, fundraising, finances, marketing, and chapter leadership. And then we do have a tools and resources for a successful chapter if you're interested in looking at that. And then finally, we have a help center. So hopefully you guys have seen the help center before, but we try to encourage our members to go to the help center to find answers to their common questions. It's searchable, so you can search for keywords. It has articles on commonly questioned topics that we try to address there. So we would encourage you to go do that first, and if you don't see your question covered in that help center, then you can certainly contact a volunteer engagement team member. And this kind of outlines who to contact for what. And I won't go through that, you can just read through that, but basically we just have a chapters, a member information, and events. So you can reach out to any of those for specific questions that you can't find on the help center. And then finally, here are just a list of resources that you might be interested in checking out. I know I mentioned our resource library. This has checklists and guidelines. It has example documents. It has PMEL example documents. It has community, cultural resources. So there's a lot of useful information there. So we'd encourage you to check that out. For information about the project process, you can find a link here, in addition to the health and safety program, and then there's a link here for all of our live and recorded presentations. And then I don't know if you guys are aware, but we do have standing content committees, which include some of our more experienced members that have a lot of experience in international development. And they basically work to help develop resources for our chapter members working on different project types. So you can see their information there. We have an energy, a sanitation, and a water supply. If you have questions regarding Volunteer Village or PAUSE, you can find that on our Help Center. We have a pretty robust set of articles surrounding that, and we're actively adding to that. So, just because you didn't see it there today, it might be there next week. We're definitely working on it every day, trying to make it more robust. And then for our chatter groups, chatter is the social function within our Volunteer Village and PAUSE system. So we would encourage you to get on there. There are groups set up for each chapter and program, and then we have groups set up for different project types. So what we hope is, as you are working through your project and kind of looking for others to reach out to collaborate with, that can be a space for that. Let's see, I think that's it for me. So thank you so much for your time and your attention, and I will open it up to questions now.